Well, here goes another day. That miserable alarm seems to go off earlier every morning. I'm usually the first one up in the household. Takes me a few minutes longer to get ready, being an amputee, so I get an early start.
Newsmen and are releasing meager information at...
Get the radio tuned in for the latest news and see what's happened during the night. I start out the morning by using the stumps. If they're long enough, in my case they are. I have a fairly mid-length stump on the below elbow side as well as above elbow on the right side. I don't bother to even put the prosthesis on. I use a standard Schick injector razor, primarily because it has a long handle on, and the blades with the injection type is much easier for me to insert without having to unwrap a standard type of blade and place it in the razor. It's easy for me to place the blade on the stump, that is a used blade, and place it back in the container. In using the stumps for shaving, it makes it easier because the water, the soap, the shaving cream that's splashed on the stumps can easily be washed off. I can feel the sensation of the water, the temperature of the water. The toothpaste that's used on the brush can be accomplished without having to worry about it being run all over the hooks or the rubber bands. This causes a problem in cleansing the devices. There are many reasons why the prostheses are not used. Naturally, if I had much shorter stumps than I have, I would have no alternative but to use an electric razor and don the prosthesis first. But in the situation that I'm in, it certainly makes life easier to handle all of these sequences before I ever put the prosthesis on. It's easy to see that the stump length readily lends itself to holding the brush and picking up the glass, using the razor. The crevice of the elbow and the below elbow arm lends itself readily to holding the brush while brushing the teeth. Towel is used in a much easier method with the stumps than it would be with the terminal devices. It's obvious to watch all of these movements that go on that every part of the body is used as much as possible to accomplish the task. The teeth and the knees and the stumps, and the toes and opening the drawers. All of this is simply a matter of practice on the amputee's part. Note the temperature can be felt by placing a stump underneath. If I were wearing terminal devices, I'd have to stick my chin or something else on there to determine the temperature. All the water that's lost doesn't bother anything. If I had the prosthesis on, I'd be concerned about getting water in the wrist unit, flexion unit, other parts of the prosthesis. Imagine yourself trying to use soap in soaping your face with two terminal devices. It'd be a most difficult thing. This way I can get complete feedback, sensitive feedback, and knowing how much pressure to apply and what part of the face I'm covering. It just seems as though I get the job done much easier in using the stumps. All I'm doing is substituting the stumps in place of the hands, and it is a little more awkward and requires a lot more body motion, but it's not really that difficult after practice is put into it. I continually dry the stumps all the time because each item that I pick up has to be held quite firmly to accomplish the job. If the stumps were wet, I would find the container slipping out and having to go through that chore of picking them up. Shaving cream is applied by an aerosol can. This is much simpler than using the old method of the brush and the shaving jar. Again, the stumps are dried because I'm going to pick up this razor, and I can't afford to have the razor slipping around. Start on the right side by holding the razor in a position between the two stumps firmly, covering the entire right side of the face. To make changes in positioning of the razor, I simply move the stump slightly to rotate the razor handle. This gives me the necessary rotation of the razor handle for correct positioning. Covered the right side, and then I switched to the left side, using it in the crevice of the below elbow, which will give me complete control in shaving the left side of the face. Some might wonder why I use a safety razor in place of an electric razor. I think it's simply a matter of preference. In my case, I just don't feel as though my face is clean and I've had a good shave with an electric razor. Therefore, I accomplish two things at once. I can get my face washed very clean. The second place, it also gives me the shave that I'm after. Shaving with the stumps may look easy, but I've never shaved any other way. You see, I've been an amputee since the age of 13. I was climbing in a cherry tree, and in reaching out for a large clump of cherries, the limb gave way, and down I went. Compound fractures, which later became infected, resulted in the amputations. Use the foot again in opening the drawer. Just another aid to help me accomplish the job. After I'm through shaving, I shower, and still at this point I haven't bothered to put the prosthesis on. Most often I'll take a shower in place of taking a bath. It depends if I'm in my own home or if I'm traveling, I'm in a hotel. If there's a bathtub present and no shower, then I'll use a bathtub. I find the shower is a bit simpler as far as getting the job of bathing done. I take a towel, a standard bath towel, and on each end of the towel I flip it over and have my wife sew a stitch down the flip part. This leaves a little pocket in each end of this towel so that I can insert the stumps into it for ease of handling. First of all, I throw the soap down in the corner, the towel on top of it, and by rotating the foot, I can suds up the towel. And the towel gives me enough area in which I can reach most parts of my body, especially the lower extremities. I am somewhat restricted in the shooting of this film where I've had to wear trunks because I can't raise the extremities as high as I want. Furthermore, it doesn't lend itself toward moving a towel up and down the torso as I'd like to have because the trunks are holding it back. And generally speaking, it is not as difficult as it looks. I'm looking for the slot that's been sewn to stick the stumps in each side so I can flip it over the back. I can start up at the neckline and work all the way down the torso, down to the ankles, to cover all parts of my body. If need be, I can put the towel back on the floor again and suds it up some more to get complete coverage. Without question, it certainly takes the fair amount of energy to do this because you have to go in all types of contortions, and you only have a limited amount of length with the stumps that you have to work with. In the case of very, very short stumps, then you'd have to revert to a bathtub and sit in the tub and perhaps use the feet and use whatever's available to accomplish the bathing process. A standard towel is used for drying. The towel should be as large as possible. This makes it easier for the amputee to handle. He can flip the towel around by snapping it, and this will dry off the opposite side of the leg or the body that he can't reach because of the stump length. As the towel becomes moist or dampened, it makes it much easier for the amputee to hang on to also.
And from the top line, fourth line in baseball action last night, San Francisco nudged Houston 4-3, but they didn't gain any ground on the league-leading St. Louis Cards. The Cards drugged Pittsburgh 8-0 as Bob Gibson won his 19th game with a 4-hitter. Also in the National, 3 doubleheaders. Cincinnati swept the Mets 8-3 and 5-2.
You can imagine the amount of exertion that we go through each day, and especially in dressing and bathing prior to the time the prostheses are put on. This is one of the reasons an amputee perspires considerably, aside from the fact that because he's lost a good portion of his cooling system through the palms of his hands and the upper part of the forearm, it's quite noticeable that one perspires considerably more than a non-amputee. Also the fact that I've been mentioning that because of the extra exertion, why this heating up process is more prevalent in amputees than in non-amputees. Notice the foot again, how we use the foot as an aid for opening the drawer. I'm using a deodorant that's in a jar. I find it's simpler than the other types. The long below elbow side is used for putting on the deodorant on the right side. Here the stump is too short on the right to reach the left, so we use the kneecap on the left side for putting on the deodorant. The jar is placed on a towel so that friction from the stump will rotate the lid and loosen it. Without the towel being underneath it, we'd find the jar sliding all around the top of the tile. This is just one of the many tricks of the trades that's used that will aid the amputee in accomplishing these jobs easier. An amputee is taught all of these methods either through their therapist or perhaps talking to other amputees. There are many ways of finding them out. Anything that he can pick up from any other amputee or through therapy training certainly will save him many, many years of hard practice and attempting to find out the easiest way to accomplish the job.
You gonna have time for breakfast this morning, Jerry?
Oh, yeah, I guess so.
What would you like?
A couple eggs and bacon.
All right.
Send Kirk or someone after the paper, will you?
Okay.
Stump socks are used for placing on each stump. I prefer the simple type nylon, tubular nylon type of stockinette that's cut off of the roll and sewed on the end. Naturally, nylon doesn't absorb the perspiration that cotton will, but likewise, I find it's much easier to stretch the nylon than it is cotton. Therefore, I prefer to use the nylon stockinette. I wear stump socks because it helps absorb the perspiration. It also makes for more comfort during the day because the stump is not being chafed within the plastic socket. The stump socks are changed each day just the same as foot socks would be changed. It's extremely important that all of the clothing, such as the T-shirt, be straightened out and all the wrinkles taken out of it, as well as the stump sock. If not, wrinkles would appear and the amputee would become very uncomfortable during the day. And it goes without saying that if the comfort is not there for the amputee, he cannot do his best in functioning the prosthesis. In donning foot socks, The two terminal devices are used for holding the top of the sock, and by rotation of the foot at the ankle, it makes it easier for the amputee to put on the sock. It'll differ considerably on the type of foot sock that is used. Some closely woven cotton socks are difficult to put on, where in comparison a nylon or a good stretch sock makes it much easier for the amputee to slip the socks on. This is the same for underwear, t-shirts, or clothing in general. For undershorts, for example, I use the nylon shorts because they're easily slipped on, can be stretched without any exertion whatever. Compared to this, a cotton short does not stretch well, and it just makes life a little more difficult in dressing. The dress shirts that I wear, I'm using nylon, again, because it seems to be easier to move in and out of the shirt compared to a cotton shirt that is starched medium or heavy. The clothing, the suits, the trousers, the coats that I wear, most of the time I use a hard gabardine or a good worsted, closely woven material. Makes it much easier for me to use my pockets and to don the trousers and the coat. If I use a tweed suit or a very loose woven material, it seems considerably more difficult to handle clothing of this type. So the choosing of clothing, both underwear and the outerwear, is, in my estimation, a very important part in considering an amputee's daily living activities. A standard shoe is used, however, the shoestring is not standard. That is, I should say, it is a standard shoestring. 3 or 4 inches of it is cut off of one end and a knot tied. The good end of the shoestring is placed through the bottom hole in the shoe and woven back and forth until we wind up at the top with just one lace. We form a loop in the top string, first tightening the lower strings to take up the slack. And once this loop is formed, it's placed under the top loop, leaving an exposure of 2 loops. The device goes through the first loop, picks up the second, and locks it over the side. It's a non-slip knot and takes but very few seconds in order to tie or untie. I spent some 5 years learning how to tie my shoes with a standard shoe tie. And all of a sudden I was shown how to use this special shoe tie, and within 5 minutes I was tying my shoes. It's just one of the tricks of the trades that's been passed along from therapist to amputee or amputee to amputee, and makes life in general much easier. Combing the hair, the mirror must be used. Without the use of the mirror, the amputee would have no reference as far as sensory feedback is concerned. Really, he couldn't tell if he was combing the hair down in the right place. Therefore, the mirror is used to see exactly where the comb should be placed and where the hair is being combed. Now, we can't see the back of the head, nor can we feel the back of the head with the devices. So as an alternate, we use another mirror to see the back of the head so that placement of the comb can be made and all the hair is combed down. I have said for many years, jokingly, that the mirror is the second best thing to a wife. Without it, you're lost. In donning the shirt, much like the coat, the right arm is inserted, the shirt is lapped over the arm to expose the shirt hole so that the left arm can be inserted easily. Without this, there would be a great deal of fumbling in trying to locate the shirt hole. A simple type of button hook has been designed that our amputees use today. It's an aluminum handle hollowed out in the center for lightness, has a spoon-shaped or dish-shaped end made of stainless steel, which is placed over the button with slight pressure while the other prosthesis pulls the shirt over the button. It's a very quick and simple operation, but a very important device in dressing. As we progress up the line, it's necessary that we use flexion. On the left arm, we are now in 50 degrees of flexion so that we can reach all of the areas in which to pull the button through. At this particular point, we stop and start with the tie sequence, primarily for one reason. When the button has to be buttoned at the top, a complete change in angle of the button hook is necessary. This requires that the button hook be set down and replaced. So I take a short rest here and start in with a tie to finish this sequence before going into buttoning the top button. And the top button is the most difficult area to reach and accomplish the job. In tying a standard tie, we have to use full 50 degrees of flexion on the left side, with the right side or above elbow side doing nothing but holding the short end of the tie. And it's obvious to see that the teeth, the knees, both devices, practically every part of the body that can be utilized is being used to accomplish this job of forming this knot and tying this tie. For simplicity, you can use the new type of clip-on tie with a knot already pre-formed. All the amputee has to do is reach up and snap the tie on. This certainly will take less energy than tying a standard tie. Now, once we've completed the buttoning of the top button, I complete the job of tying this tie. The above elbow or minor side is doing nothing but holding the short end of the tie, and you'll note the tie is wrapped around the hook finger so that pressure, downward pressure, can be applied to hold the tie while the formation of the knot and the completion is made. Inserting the shirt in the trousers may seem quite simple, but in reality it's quite difficult. I insert the right arm with the hook thumb through the belt loop. This allows me to hold the trousers up, and yet the hook fingers on the right arm are free to open and close if they need be. Perhaps I'd have to come around the other side and hold the other side of the trousers up with it. In placing the shirt in the trousers, it is quite difficult because there is no sensory feedback from the terminal devices. Therefore, it's a matter of doing contortions and constantly pushing the shirt down. Oftentimes, I'll look in the mirror to make certain that my shirt tail is tucked in right. The buttonhole in the coat does not require the use of a button hook because the slot is large enough to place the hook fingers through it. Normally I don't have breakfast in the morning, but I have sufficient time today, so I'll indulge in a little eating to add to the waistline. My wife, Pearl, is up and at it, cooking the breakfast this morning. Take a few minutes out and read the Daily Gazette, see what's happened during the night. The silverware that's placed on the mat will be changed around. This is a matter of convenience for me. It's not according to Emily Post, but it certainly lends itself for ease of functioning and eating. Cup, for example, and using a cup of coffee, I use the simplest type of cup that I can get. The more delicate, sophisticated type cups are more difficult to handle because of their smallness. I guess the kids have beat me to it. They're already on their way to school. In picking up a glass, you'll note the canted fingers, how they wrap around the glass, causing a three-point contact. This is a very important part of using a glass so that it doesn't slip out. Salt and pepper shakers are grasped by the top so that only one movement is made for placing the salt and pepper on the food. The knife is used in the left or below elbow side with the hook fingers over the blade and the handle across the thumb. This permits downward pressure without the knife being able to slip out. On the right above elbow side, we simply use the fork. This is nothing but a holding device which requires very little energy and is a requirement in order to accomplish the cutting job. Once the utensils are placed on the plate, the fork then will be used in the left side. This is accomplished by rotating the plate in order to pick up the fork, because again, we're going to use the fork for ease of function with the below elbow side rather than the above elbow. Originally, I was dominantly right-handed prior to my amputations, but naturally, with the left arm being the longest stump, it certainly makes more sense to use the easiest side and the more adaptable side for most of the function. Pearl and I have been married for 20 years. It goes without saying that without her patience and care, why, it's made life much easier for me being an amputee. She understands all of the quirks and the various things that I have to do to accomplish daily living activities. It's become a part of life. Family adjustment, I don't think, is really too much of a problem. As far as the amputee becoming adjusted to the family or the family becoming adjusted to the amputee, there is one great downfall in this acceptance, or whatever you might term it, and that is, I have found that in amputees that seem to fail in doing the job as well as they should do, usually you can follow it back to the family. It's the family that has caused the amputee to be the way he is, either to have the attitude he wants to go ahead or to take the attitude that he doesn't care anymore. And we found in many cases that it's the family that has been the one that has stimulated either one of these routes to take, especially the wife or the mother is really a big factor in the end result. If this amputee goes home, he's an adult, he has a wife and children. First of all, he may have the type of wife who's extremely sympathetic. So rather than to see her poor husband struggle through this fighting and struggling to do this job, she says, "No, dear, let me do this. Let me cut your meat. Let me pamper him." But she's not doing it with the intention in mind of really pushing him down. She's doing it from a motherly instinct, I think, that she wants to help this poor individual because she feels sorry for him. But in feeling sorry for him this way, she's making matters worse, because if she's constantly there, doing everything for you, pretty soon you become just dependent. And if the family understands this, that sure, when you need help and you're in a hurry or something, you get help. But for daily routine of everything, she's not driving for you and picking your nose and doing all this. This is part of the understanding, and so it just becomes general routine. Without this understanding in the family, why, the end result may not be as good. That's my little dog, PJ. PJ was just a pup when she was walking to school with my youngest boy and was hit on this street in front of our house. She was taken immediately to the vet, and the vet telephoned me at my office and said, "Jerry, Sorry, but your dog's in very bad shape. It's been run over, and it's in terrible, terrible condition. And I said, gee, what's wrong, Doc? Does it have to be put away? And he said, yeah, I'm afraid so. I said, well, what's wrong? And the vet said, well, his leg's been broken, and it looks as though we can't save it. We're going to have to amputate it. And I said, well, go ahead and amputate it. And he said, why, Jerry, he said, you don't want a dog with one leg. And I said, well, gee, Doc, you ought to see what his master looks like, so get to it and amputate it. And as I recall, after receiving the bill, I think the amputation was twice as much as mine was. In driving, you'll note we use a driving ring. Sometimes you'll find bilaterals using the rings on both sides, but it really is quite more convenient to have the driving ring on one side. It's a simple type of clamp arrangement with an oil light bearing and a swivel in it. I was driving down the turnpike, and I was going into New York City, and I came to one of these miserable places where I had to keep dropping dimes in every 5 miles. And I picked the dime up, and I reached out as I pulled up and stopped, and I handed it to the guy, and he put both hands up because he thought I'd pulled a gun on him. He probably was engaged thinking of something else. And he's picking dimes up all day long from people driving up. But when I drove up, he turned his head, and all he seen was something shiny flash out, and he raised his hands like he was being held up, you know. Well, then he was embarrassed to tears, and I was embarrassed, and I said, well, don't let it bother you. You know, if I'd known you kept your hands up a little longer, I'd have rifled the till. Time ensued going to work is not very long. Takes me 6 or 7 minutes. Nice drive through the orchards. No freeway traffic. Makes it enjoyable. Good morning.
Good morning, Jerry. How are you?
Hi.
Fine. How's everyone this morning?
Great. Did you have a nice weekend?
Wonderful, thank you. Here at Hosmer, we manufacture prosthetic component parts and supplies. We're considered the principal supplier in the United States as well as abroad of these products. Wonderful. Good to have part of our office personnel handling the mail in the morning, checking over all the orders. After all, the orders are an essential part of operating a business. Without this, our prosthetic business wouldn't do too well, but we enjoy a good customer relationship. Many fine customers all over the world. Fine. Strictly in prosthetics, nothing else.
That'll ship today.
This is Jan, our export manager.
Some of the OW100 wrists.
Handles all of the documentation and invoicing throughout the world
Came in this morning too, so we should be pretty good.
for all the orders that are received of our products.
Right.
Hardly a morning ever goes by, but we don't have 2 or 3 good, genuine problems. My particular activities involve a little of everything from management up through marketing, in as much as we are in the wholesale business only. We accumulate all of the mail, and those that need responding are handled right away, and this is just a routine activity. In handling the telephone, I use the above elbow side for holding the telephone. This leaves my below elbow or longer stump free for any real activity such as writing, since I do write with my left arm now. Also makes it easier for dialing, handling papers. This is just another good example of using the shorter amputation for just a holding device. Yeah, good morning, Noel. How are you? How's things in Dorrance this morning? Wonderful. Well, I have a letter that I received this morning from Pakistan with a sizable order on it. They're opening up a new prosthetic center. And included in the order is a considerable amount of terminal devices. And I'd like to know if you have any suggestions. It's left open to us as to the type of terminal devices we'd like to send them. Right, number 5s. A pen or a pencil is held between the hook fingers, more or less an upright position. This gives the best control for writing purposes. It's much better than putting the pen or pencil between the fingers and across the thumb like we would a knife handle. This sets the point too far out, does not give you good writing control. Well, naturally, being an amputee, you have no other choice but to use the good old Palmer method. You can't cheat by wiggling your fingers. So in reality, at least in my own case, why I find that my riding perhaps is even a shade better than it was prior to the time that I received the amputations.
Sounds very good. And I'll advise him today of that, Noel, and if you'll have him over here within 2 weeks, why, we'll have everything ready to go. Thanks so much. Goodbye. We advertise very little, but the few times that we do in our own trade, I'm going to use a drawing or a picture of this with some caption. You know, if only Hosmer had been in business in the days.
This is Friday afternoon late, and usually, weather providing, we spend the weekend up at a place we have in the lake about 350 miles north of our home, Northern California. We're using our Aero Commander for transportation. Flying an airplane is extremely easy to use, perhaps in many cases much easier than driving an automobile. Been flying for about 10 or 11 years, starting out with single engines and advancing up to a medium twin-engine aircraft. This plane holds 7 passengers and pretty well provides enough room for the family and other guests. Started flying back in 1957, a very small single-engine, low-powered airplane. Actually, I started flying because of the necessity of time involved in traveling. At that time, I traveled mostly by car across the United States, calling on all of our accounts. And then again, I would use the airlines. The schedules weren't too good, and oftentimes I had to wait for many hours just to travel 100 or 200 miles. For this reason, I decided to take up flying and do my own flying and scheduling, making it easier to complete the trip and return within a shorter length of time. A few months ago, we completed a trip in this same aircraft throughout South America, visiting our accounts and putting on various programs to rehabilitation centers, and we covered 22,000 miles in 97 and a half hours of flying time, extending all the way to Buenos Aires, all through South America, up the Caribbean and back. The only problem, really had no problems in learning how to fly. It was quite simple, as I mentioned before. The biggest hurdle I had to get over was convincing the FAA that I was capable of flying. And for this, they put me through quite extensive tests, about 4 or 5 times more than they usually do, to determine that I could fly and I could handle it. And then I was certificated for each type of aircraft. Every time I change model of aircraft or type, then I have to go up through another test and be completed for that, but I've pretty well gone through all of them by now. This aircraft inside has standard equipment on it. The only change that's been made for my purpose is the ease of operation as far as using the throttles are concerned and the prop controls. These have been redesigned in having a large hole on the inside of these throttles and knobs to permit me to hold on to the knob and control the props and to control the throttles without having to constantly watch the position of my terminal device so that it does not slip off. And this way I can watch outside, keep complete control on it. Very similar to the driving ring in the automobile. It's just a matter of convenience and added safety. Other than these 2 items, the airplane is standard. The amputee, in my estimation, will only get out of this thing as much as he puts into it. The amputee in reality is not much different than an individual who has all his facilities. If if you're playing golf and you have all your facilities, it takes time and practice, it takes coordination, it takes much patience. Likewise with the amputee, if he's using his prosthesis to accomplish his daily living activities, his vocation, his avocation, this too takes considerable practice and also takes a great deal of patience. Insofar as the amputee is concerned, many things are involved, whether he's successful or not successful in functioning his prosthesis. His training, whatever training he's going to get from the therapist is going to reflect on his final attitude, and the end result will be how well he successfully uses them. His family life, how he gets along with his family, if everyone tries to aid him too much or not aid him enough, they understand some of the things that he has to do. This is all a part of being a successful user. The family, I think, has a great bearing on what the amputee eventually will become from a standpoint of being relatively good at using his prosthesis. So it's primarily a matter of genuine interest and understanding and putting himself to doing the best job that he possibly can do with, of course, the help of good equipment that he's going to wear.